Welcome, viewers, to our ongoing nuclear-free future conversation here at the Center for Media and Democracy here in Burlington, Vermont. I'm your host, Margaret Harrington, and viewers, let's welcome our guests, all from Fairewinds Energy Education, located right here in Burlington, Vermont. And this is Maggie Gundersen over here, the founder and CEO of Fairewinds Energy Education, and Caroline Phillips, who is Caroline, the title that you have?
Program Administrator.
Program Administrator at Fairewinds, and Chiho Kaneko. Welcome back, Chiho.
Nice to meet you again.
You were here a few years ago with a woman from Fukushima.
That's right.
And you are a board member at Fairewinds Energy Education. Now,
thanks for having us all, Margaret.
Oh, thank you so much for coming. And the topic that we have given ourselves is children suffer nuclear impact worldwide. Now, on March 11th of this year, the fifth anniversary of the Fukushima triple meltdown, I heard on the BBC News all about the tsunami with no mention of the meltdown at Fukushima-Dai-ichiin. So what is the impact on children? Because the news media is not talking about this at all.
So in Fukushima specifically, in Japan, well, it's actually, it's misleading to say Fukushima children because radiation pollution has impacted practically half the Japan, half of the Japanese island. But they are monitoring, following the health of children who lived in Fukushima at the time of the disaster. And I think they keep expanding slightly the definition, but let's say out of, 300,000 children who were 18 or younger in 2011, today confirmed 116 thyroid cancer cases, which statistically quite high because prior to that, Japanese average was 3 in 1 million. So you could say if you just compare the confirmed thyroid cancer cases among children, which is supposed to be very rare anyway, the jump is 30 times.
We also have to look too. I was reading how thyroid cancer has now entered the top 10. I think it's 7th worldwide of most common cancers, which is a very new phenomenon. You have to ask, why is that happening as well?
Mm-hmm. And also, we talk about thyroid cancer mainly because that is basically the only thing that's recognized by the WHO, IAEA as some disease that can be caused by nuclear disaster. However, that doesn't mean that other illnesses don't occur. And so, in fact, maybe the worst thing is that there are a lot of things unreported or undocumented, and things are happening in health-wise in a very negative way.
And exactly what is being documented?
From what we've seen, very little is being documented, and many of the papers are being destroyed after 2 years. They're keeping medical records for 2 years, and then they're destroying them. And there is a conscious effort and an order to doctors to not talk about any radiation sickness, any radiation-induced issues. When Arnie was in Japan in February, he met a doctor who had a clinic, and his clinic was shut down because he either had to say that the people he was treating had no radiation-induced illnesses, or he would not, if he wanted to be paid, he had to say that. And he refused to say that, so they cut all of his funding for the clinic.
And it's fallen on individuals and people in Japan and abroad for these epidemiological studies. There's not the epidemiological studies that would track these things, like Maggie said, with papers being destroyed after 2 years. It's really fallen on independent groups to carry on this work. For example, when you look at Chernobyl, we just had we don't like to use the term anniversary because it's not a celebratory thing, but the 30-year commemoration of the meltdown at Chernobyl, we look at the cancer rates of children and people, and that we know. So knowing that and knowing that at Fukushima we're not keeping these records, it's pretty lax and it's pretty devastating.
Are you saying then that in Chernobyl they're keeping a better, or have kept a better record?
Not
And are they
necessarily.
treating the children, or did they treat the children better? Did they evacuate the children right away?
No.
In
No.
Chernobyl?
No.
No.
Like every government that's faced a nuclear release, atomic reactor meltdown, or any other kind of pipe break and huge radiation release, they don't tell the public. It's just kept under wraps because the public already doesn't like nuclear power, doesn't like atomic reactors, and they would want them shut down if they knew how vulnerable they are to the health impacts.
But then, as Chernobyl basically, was in USSR when it happened, but then the whole region became Ukraine and then Belarus. Basically, Chernobyl was in very near Ukraine-Belarus border. So I can talk about what I heard happened in Belarus is that eventually the government decided to give people right to move if they live in the area where the annual dose radiation exceeds what's that, five millisieverts.
Yeah.
But in Japan, I think the government is trying to, what's happening in Japan today, so the Japanese government is trying to make people stay in the area even though radiation level might be as much as 20 millisieverts per year.
Which is so much more than a worker gets exposed to.
Right. And how are they making? They're making people stay there, both by convincing them that there's no danger, right? And
in part convincing them there's no danger and pulling the financial support for them to evacuate or live in a separate area. Especially with the Olympics coming to Tokyo, they want to, since they'll be on the world stage, they want everything to appear normalized. It's a challenging paradigm.
Yeah, and that sort of the government is trying to put a best face on the situation goes hand in hand with the actually victimize the local government sort of a desperate desire to keep the towns and cities going. So so they don't want their municipalities disappear. So they basically accept government funding for rebuilding or remediation because that's the only thing that the money is going to go to, basically.
Right.
And so that's a very unfortunate. Their priorities, in my mind, it's wrong.
yeah, are you saying then that they're sacrificing the well-being of the children,
Right.
for the economic issues?
Yep.
Yeah.
Even our Fairewinds chief engineer, Maggie Gundersen, was recently in Japan, and he was visiting some of the women that were living as refugees who had been living near Fukushima-Dai-ichiin and are now living in what they're calling temporary housing, but is sort of turning into more than temporary housing. And most of these women had not ever had someone come and talk to them about radiation doses that they might have been exposed to or were exposed to. They'd never been talked to. The most news that they were receiving was
A written sheet that
written
came once
sheet
a month
that
from
came once a
TEPCO.
month, yeah.
TEPCO sent a written report, but never talked about the radiological issues or, and no one told them what's happening. And they have a certain stipend, and the government's trying to constrain those expenses and move the people back into whatever areas are possible. So again, so that things look like the country's back to normal and everything's okay. As Yet, as they collect debris, I mean, I'm sure some of your viewers have seen the astronomical piles of what look like trash bags filled with all this debris that's been cleaned up, allegedly cleaned up. And those bags of debris, first off, they're beginning to disintegrate. Second off, they're building incinerators to burn it. And you can never precipitate, or a precipitator is a device that's on a stack, so when you're burning to get the particulate out, you'll never get it all, and especially in the case of radiation. So that it's going to be redeposited. And right now, from the areas that they cleaned, all the rain and flooding and snow melt has brought all new deposits of radiation down from the mountains. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. And I know you mentioned Arnie Gundersen, the chief engineer at Fairewinds, and he said that he measured the radiation there too. Mm-hmm. Could you talk about that a little bit?
He's working with some other scientists who are studying both the Japanese scientists, the samples that they took, and the US scientists who are evaluating the samples. And they're finding astronomical amounts of radiation even in downtown Tokyo, outside of METI's door. And METI is the regulatory agency over nuclear power. So it's just...
it's a ministry of trade and industry and things like that.
Yeah, and they took, when he and others were downtown in Tokyo, they took samples right there in a garden right outside the door and on the front doormat, and these are really, really high samples.
Yeah, it's frightening.
Frightening, because people walking in Tokyo then will be inhaling that dust. What was the film that we saw from Japan that had the mothers who were in an area where kids play and run from middle school?
It's a fantastic video, and I can't recall the name. It's a mother's organization. They live in the Fukushima prefecture, and they're actually using Geiger counters that have been issued by the government, and they're walking along the river, and I can't recall the name of the river, but you see children.
I remember that. It was, I think, in Fukushima City.
In Fukushima City.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And what's really so tragic about it, kids are running along dirt paths doing
gym classes,
gym class and track and things like that. And the mothers are right down in areas that are not posted and that kids can go after school and play, and people do nature hikes and stuff. And the radiation readings are horrific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about the food that the children are eating?
Which is an interesting thing. That's actually come up recently. The Associated Press did a great expose in Chernobyl discussing children. And so in Chernobyl, there are 4 zones. They kind of broke it down into 4 zones. Zones 1 through 3 have been declared evacuated zones. And the government gave money for people for resettlement and that sort of thing. Zone 4, which is roughly 32 miles from Chernobyl, the nuclear power plant meltdown site, they sort of what Chiho was talking about, they're deemed in a zone that was contaminated but not enough by government standards. So these people were promised health subsidies. Well, with Ukraine's economic depression right now, this government funding can no longer happen. It's dried up.
These kids had free lunch every day.
They had free lunch.
And that was their main meal.
Right. So these kids used to get government funded free lunches that were radiation tested. That's no longer. So this really, it's heart-wrenching. This expose follows a mother who's feeding her children foraged mushrooms, foraged berries, milk from their cows, and
they know it's all
contaminated, but
it's either that or go hungry.
So how food and contamination of food, this mother that they're following, she has 4 children, and one of the sons, I don't remember if it's the oldest or not, he's 8 years old, but they do still get tested. The children do still get tested for thyroid issues, and he has an enlarged thyroid. He's 8 years old. But she said, what choice do I have? So it's a devastating thing, and we see this 30 years after the Chernobyl meltdown. Fukushima-Dai-ichiin is a triple meltdown.
Yeah, that was one plant at
That's,
Chernobyl.
you
This
know,
is three
three.
times the radiation.
Well, so I can speak a little bit about Japanese food monitoring.
Yes.
They are testing, they say, and it is true, a lot of testing's being done, but especially produce and from Fukushima, I think they're pretty much all tested. However, other areas outside of Fukushima, some places are quite contaminated as well. And those fruit vegetables are tested as well to some extent, but not as rigorously. And they are testing school lunch ingredients even in my home of Morioka City, which is more than 150 miles north of Fukushima. Mm-hmm. But that's, they maybe test once a week. So it's not like every day. So I actually know a mother who lives in Morioka City. She started to notice her children, one was in elementary school, one was in kindergarten, started to show very unusual health symptoms in the summer of 2011. And eventually she had her children's urine tested and found that they found a fairly high level of cesium in their urine, and she freaked out. And so she tested everything and lobbied the school and then found out there was a milk that the school was providing. And she begged the school teacher to please change the brand of milk. But the Japanese, educators or sort of especially at the higher level, they're like bureaucrats. Mm-hmm. And they didn't want to do things to rattle the Board of Education. So they told the mother, we can't do that, but if you don't want to have your children, consume our school lunch, why don't you make your kids just bring lunch? It was sort of like a threat, right? Mm-hmm. Well, she did. Yeah. And she was a very courageous person. She was so driven by protecting her children. Yeah. And that really helped the kids of her children.
And Chiho, this is at a distance from Fukushima-Dai-ichiin.
Yeah. So it's just an example. Yeah. But it kind of sort of highlights how difficult it is to test everything. When I go to Japan, I basically assume I'm probably eating a lot of food that's contaminated.
That's what Arnie found when he was there too. And there was a lot of people who know nothing about radiation. The government has said that everything's fine for them to be in the areas they live in. He was gifted wild boar, and they tested it, and it was outrageously
That's
high.
one of the worst things to eat.
Yeah, I know, because the boar forage in all the forests that have so much contamination on the mountains. And it's just terrible. So but people haven't been taught, they haven't been told not to eat that. In parts of Europe, they know you can't, still 30 years after Chernobyl, you cannot eat in Wales, you cannot eat lamb. You cannot eat any of the wild boar in Germany. No. And, you have to bring, if you hunt wild boar, you have to bring it and have it tested to see if it's clean. In Germany, they have facilities set up for that. So, this is like a real denial of the way people exist. And look at the Laplanders, for example. Their reindeer was their diet, and it's still so contaminated they have to bring reindeer meat into the Laplanders now because the lichen absorbed, which the reindeer eat, absorbs so much of the radiation, the airborne radiation. It's, we have one of our slogans at Fairewinds is radiation knows no borders. And if whatever country is building nuclear plants or nuclear weapons or having a reprocessing facility, that's a danger to all of us around the globe.
You know, I don't know if we how it was exactly in Chernobyl, but what's making situation really complicated and difficult, especially for women, is that if you speak out and about your concerns, especially your children or whatever, they are in turn attacked by the sort of society at large, that they are sort of undermining the recovery effort by bringing unwanted sort of a publicity or and reputation to the area. And so they are forced to sort of shut up and suffer quietly. And it is very important for women to actually seek each other's support, and some people are really trying to make that happen. But it's to me heartbreaking that that kind of just the basic human instinct, to protect life, is considered to be a treasonous act to the government.
Protecting your children is treasonous.
Yeah.
Arnie saw that clearly.
Yeah.
Arnie Gundersen, when he was in Japan, he met a woman who moved with her 3-year-old when the meltdowns occurred. And she moved to an area of Japan that's way south and there's no radiation. And the result is now her family and husband are fighting in court to get the child back to an area that's still contaminated, and saying that she's crazy because the government tells them everything is okay. So they're taking her to court to try and get custody of her child.
What you're describing is a massive government clampdown on truth, and also that impacts both the triple thing: health, social, and economic well-being of the children in particular, who we're talking about now, but the women and everyone.
Right. And as you mentioned those things, I also think those children are the most vulnerable in health, in socially, and economically. They don't have a say. They don't have a voice.
Right, and they're more like 10 times radio sensitive, so
10
they suffer more from radiation.
The women are 10 times?
Children, sorry.
Oh, children.
10
Yeah.
times, yeah.
Children.
What does that mean exactly?
Well, the radiation is on the ground. It's in the air they breathe. They're closer to the ground. They're playing in the dust.
Little
They're tying
toddlers.
their shoes and getting dirt on their hands, and the dirt is contaminated, and they touch their face and their mouth, so they're ingesting radioactive particles. They're running and playing in the sand, and they're stirring all this up, and they're breathing it in, and they're just living in a very contaminated world, and their bodies haven't matured yet, so their organs are vulnerable.
That's exactly, yeah.
But
Cell turnover's faster.
everything. In Chernobyl, with all the cesium, one of the things they diagnosed and found, and they track now, is Chernobyl heart, which cesium is absorbed into the body, just as if it's potassium, and so cesium is there, and it makes the heart develop in different fashion, so it doesn't function right.
Yes, and we're coming to almost the end of our program here, but you haven't touched on the other things besides the cesium, the tritium, the strontium to the bones, right?
Right.
Could you speak a little bit about that? The tritium, and is it in the water of?
Well, we talk about tritiated water a lot because tritium has the same elements as hydrogen. So it carries the same properties. Water, as we know, is H2O. So tritium easily binds with oxygen, creating tritiated water. And we talk about that a lot. Tritium also, like water, binds with air. So we have tritiated air. Also considering life form species, whether it's vegetation or our own bodies, are typically 3/4 composed of water. We have organically bound tritium. Once you get to the organically bound tritium, I mean, that stays in your body for, Ian Fairley said up to
3 years.
more than that.
Is it?
I think
Okay.
it was maybe even 5. And we did, Fairewinds has a great podcast with Dr. Ian Fairley, who specializes in this, but tritium is found in the groundwater at Vermont Yankee. Tritium has been found in groundwater at Indian Point.
Right.
Tritium's been found in, is it groundwater or being released in Biscayne Bay?
It's
down at Turkey Point.
down. It's come through these canals where it was released from the plant, and it's into Biscayne Bay itself.
And
in the
Fukushima
ocean.
has huge tritium issues with the amount of water that they're having enormous problems containing their contaminated water. Even with the crazy ice wall that they're building that cost, I think it's like $350 million to create, and now
doesn't
leaks
work.
50 tons of this ice
Ice water
tritiated water every day.
Oh, so in Fukushima, I think the problem is that the groundwater is, it's from the mountain behind those different reactors, constantly, every day, seeping into the reactor buildings, which are basically melted down, 3 of them, and something like 300 to 400 tons of water every day. So what do you do with that contaminated water that increased by day? They're putting into tanks. And I think they have almost 1,000 water tanks, humongous, something like 800,000 tons of water stored in tanks. And they have equipment to filter out some of the radionuclides. But tritium is not something that you can, with today's technology, you can't filter out. So basically you end up with a massive amount of tritiated water that they don't know what to do with. And so now discussing whether releasing that into Pacific or evaporating or burying, and none of that option is, of course, is advisable, but they are publicly talking about it. And that kind of highlighted the issue of treated water. But in fact, that the treated water is all over the world.
It's all over the world.
As long as a nuclear power plant operates, you're going to create treated water. And I don't know about U.S., but in Japan, I know they're releasing, those reactors, they're releasing
All
into
the reactors release tritium every day of operation. And so you have the tritiated air, and then it gets
Which can penetrate your skin.
Right, which can, and then it gets picked up it picks up moisture. The air picks up the moisture and comes down. So you have fallout, tritiated rain falling out near nuclear plants, atomic reactors all over the U.S. And nobody's aware of this.
Well, people might say, what's the problem with treated water?
It crosses the placental barrier. It crosses the placental barrier. It stays in the body.
When organically bound, yeah.
Yeah, and well, just regular tritiated water crosses the placental barrier, and it hits all the organs, and it lodges particles in your organs. And before it passes through, the industry claimed it used to be in the body for only 50 days. But Dr. Fairley has proved that it's in the body for years. And it's just there. And so those isotopes will cause changes in the cells. It'll cause cancers or other illnesses.
What you're describing is a great. It's disgusting.
It's tragic.
A tragic.
Yeah. It's tragic, and it's hard to wrap your head around.
Yes, and it's so irresponsible, and at the same time very much plotted out to be this way. So could you please just address this the impact of nuclear on children, just for closing remarks now?
Well, I'm 27 years old, and I think about issues like tritiated air, tritiated water. I'd love to have kids one day. It's a terrifying thought to think, I love farmers markets. I love the areas where I live. Have my gardens, have my farmers' gardens been contaminated with tritiated water? And what if that stays in my body for hypothetically 3 or 5 years? What does that mean for my potential children? Let alone if there's a toddler who's eating carrots that are grown from their garden, and you're teaching your child, You know, you want to eat fresh foods. I mean, I live,
safe.
but is it safe? But is it safe?
And I have grandchildren, or one and another one on the way. So, you know, it's a major concern. I want to protect our future generations, and this industry chooses not to do that.
Wow. And I just feel like people are not given, I mean, people since 1950s were not given a say in the matter whether we wanted all this radiation pollution. And, well, we don't want. That is a clear statement, right?
Yes.
And why shouldn't it be an okay thing to say? And it's that simple. I mean, we don't want pollution.
Right, right.
Yeah. And so can we start there?
Okay.
Yeah.
We start there, right here. And thank you very much, all of you from Fairewinds Energy Education.
Thank you for having us,
And
Margaret.
thank you, viewers, and thank you, Channel 17 Center for Media and Democracy.